Danny Forde, thanks very much for joining me on Hermitix podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We are going to be discussing your recently released book, Phenomenology of Psychedelic Experiences, which was published by Palgrave Macmillan this year, 2025. And this is a book dealing with the experience of psychedelics, or obviously psychedelic experience from a phenomenological perspective. But it is also arguing various things that psychedelic experience can reveal, aspects of reality that otherwise we might not be able to access, let's say, and also delves into the question of the nature of the subject and the nature of reality, how those intertwine when they sort of come face to face, so to speak, with a psychedelic experience. So, Danny, I mean, just tell us a bit about yourself and the origin of this book.
Uh, just hearing you spell it out like that, it sounds quite impressive, to be honest with you. I don't. The origin of the book. It started, I guess. I went back to college or I did a BA when I was 31, and the same year that I started, the Alessandro Salice, who ended up being my PhD supervisor, joined the philosophy department in University College Cork the same year. And in third year of the BA, there was an option to do, I think it was just called a research essay. It was just a 5,000 words, just a really short little dissertation. And yeah, I think I did the phenomenology module in second year. Um, and I found it to be the most challenging, but also the most rewarding of the modules that I did in my undergraduate. So I thought there was something there. And through discussions with Alessandro, I sort of identified this idea of the ego dissolution as something that could be interesting from a phenomenological point of view. So that ended up, small parts of that ended up being chapter 2 in the book as it is now. Yeah, and it sort of went from there. I finished the BA, and then I looked into doing MPhil, and ended up just going straight into the PhD, into sort of doing some reading for a couple of years. Most of it got written. Yeah, and then COVID happened, so that was fun. Two little girls were born during that time as well, so it sort of got written in between, feeding children and avoiding the plague. Um,
This is your PhD thesis.
yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So the PhD thesis, and then I submitted that that was finished in 2023. Yeah, and then I just went looking for a publisher, found Palgrave, and they were very receptive to the idea, and they gave me lots of good feedback how to make it less thesis-like and more book-like. So there was a few back and forth, did alterations here and there, and yeah, there it is. That's the finished product. We came out in July this year. Um, Actually, I'm just looking at it now. I could probably say the very origins of it probably go back even further. The image on the cover is actually a painting that was done by a friend of my father's in probably the late 1970s, I think. So that was hanging up in the living room of my house like all throughout the childhood. So there was always some sort of weird elements of psychedelia always ever present, I guess.
And whereabouts what are the origins of your sort of, if you want to go into it, the origins of your history of psychedelics? Or are we going to say that, of course, all your knowledge of psychedelics comes from friends who've done them, and not yourself?
I think what people on the internet use was an acronym. Someone who isn't me, so but swim. Swim is what they say. No, I mean, I say in the last chapter of the book, I had like a experience with some mushrooms in Bondel Park back in 2001, and then I kind of lived through the sort of the head shop era as it was here. I don't know if it was the same in the UK, but in Ireland for a brief window of time, you could there was a loophole where you could legally purchase psilocybin mushrooms, but I don't know, 2004, 2005 ish, where that eventually got shut down. So yeah, there's experience, but it's mostly a long time ago now.
Mm. Okay. So, I mean, but the big question to open this all up: what is a psychedelic experience?
Yeah, that's it sounds like it's a simple question. I mean, well, okay, we'll start with what are psychedelics. And again, then there's lots of different avenues. Like in the book, specifically state that I'm just dealing with what's called like the classic psychedelics, which makes it sound like classic rock. But there's the four. There's LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, and DMT. Uh, Nowadays, there's a whole lot on, I think it's what's called the gray market. So there's like tons and tons of different psychedelics being introduced all the time, usually to circumvent the law in one European country or another. Like there's one PLSD, one VLSD, there's loads of variations, but they all sort of try to do the same thing, or they're all supposedly do the same thing, which is they alter your perception, not just of the world, but of yourself. They alter your mood, um, your sense of reality and how you experience reality. Typically, they sort of follow the same sort of structure and carry the same, oh, not always, I guess. Like anytime I talk about psychedelics, there's always a large asterisk at the end because there's always a ton of footnotes and disclaimers to be made. But in ideal settings, they carry deep existential meaning as well. So structure-wise, there's kind of four key stages that they go through. I mean, I referenced Preller and Vollenweider in the book. They have a good paper on the phenomenology of psychedelic experiences from a sort of neuroscientific sort of point of view. But also there was a Swedish author called Patrick Lundborg, who unfortunately, he died quite young, I think in maybe I'm getting the dates wrong now, approximately 2012 or 2013, but he had some really good papers and really good book on psychedelics. And in one of them, he sort of collated all the data from like Masters and Houston, who wrote, what was their book? Varieties of Psychedelic Experience. I think they were a husband and wife team in the 1960s. So data from them and from like Tim Leary, Richard Alpert, and he also came up with this sort of four stages. So the four stages are the first ones, there's your perceptual distortions, which is sort of the first thing you notice when after you've ingested a psychedelic, maybe 20 minutes to an hour later. So the edges of things become kind of sharper, colors can become richer, sounds can become crisper. I kind of liken it to going from like VHS quality to like 4K very subtly, just sort of things get turned up. There can be some geometric patterns at this stage, maybe hints of synesthesia, just general sort of shifts in your sensory processing. The next stage then is sort of the recollective psychodynamic stage. So here you sort of experience a loosening of access to maybe memories or emotions, kind of unconscious material. In the 1950s, there was a thing called psycholytic theory or theory therapy, which was LSD used as an adjunct to psychotherapy. But rather than giving someone a full dose, they give them like maybe a half dose or like a third of a dose of LSD. Psycholytic just means mind loosening, so it would be kind of give you better access maybe to things that maybe you'd repressed, for example. And the third stage then is the symbolic existential. So here you're sort of having things getting slightly more interesting and more elaborate and more psychedelic is the vernacular understanding of the term. So here is like a or encounter with archetypes, mythological creatures, you can traverse landscapes, travel across the cosmos, typified sort of by transformative and symbolic struggles. And then the last, the very peak, all of these are obviously commensurate with dosage. If you're taking a high dose, then you'll get to stage 4, which is the integral self-transcendence. So that's where you have the dissolution of the ego and your sort of mystical experience with, profound sense of unity, and usually a sense of contact with ultimate reality. Ideally, all of these are typified with, there's an element of playfulness as well, but that's not always the case. But I don't know. There was a Alison Gopnik who was I think she's a psychologist based in LA, but I saw a little roundtable discussion with her, and she said, if you want to know what a psychedelic experience is, and you don't have any psychedelics, just have a tea party with some 4-year-olds. And now that I have 4-year-olds, I can, it's not entirely all the way there, but she's not entirely wrong either. There's there's a large amount of imagination and play that goes into it as well.
Could you expand on that? What is synonymous between those experiences? The playfulness, like you mentioned.
Oh, it's just what Alison Gopnik was saying, like
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
tea party.
yeah.
It's just what you leave your ordinary sort of sense of self at the door, and you just sort of have to surrender to the game if you're actually going to have fun and play properly with 4-year-olds, on their level, because they don't have the same, I don't know, what's the word, calcified sort of sense of self, or the social boundaries and restrictions that you um, sort of concretize as you become an adult. You can just sort of like, all right, okay, if you want to enjoy the game properly, then yeah, I'll have a cup of tea, and you sort of add in your own. Yeah, you need to let your imagination just sort of go with the flow with them. So I think that's where the playfulness comes in, and that's to get the most out of psychedelic experience. You have to sort of surrender to it as well, because the ego will try to sort of hold on, but which I think is where sort of bad trips come in. Is like you have to just sort of surrender to it. And the same with playing with the 4-year-olds. If you're going to have a good cup of tea with them, then you need to just let go of your ordinary sense of self.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I did mean to. I mean, I probably should have put this question before asking you what psychedelic experiences was and whether or not you've taken any. But is there any misconceptions just regarding this whole area of thought? We'll springboard off the fourfold thing soon. But I do want to clear up if there's any misconceptions you felt. I guess in your experience of also writing the book, of being someone who's engrossed in the field.
Um, yeah, I mean, lots. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Um, like psychedelic is such a loaded term. Like as soon as anyone hears the word, they imagine or they immediately or have, preconceptions or notions about what that entails, whether it be good or bad. Um, so the word itself is sort of loaded. People have tried to come up with alternatives. Like I think it was Jonathan Ott came up with the term entheogen, which crops up sometimes, which means generating the divine within. But again, if we're going to go with that, then that also there's a lot of linguistic baggage if you're talking about generating the divine within. Mystical mimetic was another term in the 50s before psychedelic was fixed, as the sort of the term for these chemicals. There was a ton. There was schizotoxin was one. Psychotomimetic was another. I've talked to, I can't remember the guy's name. He was a professor of, I think it was anthropology or philosophy from Colombia, and he does field work with tribes in Colombia where they use ayahuasca. And he was telling me that like they not angry with they insist that the correct term that you use is medicine, because that's what they use it as. They use it as a medicine. But I don't know whether we like it or not. Like psychedelic is the term that we're stuck with, so it is what it is. In terms of misconceptions, then I guess the main was that they're a catalyst. They're not a magic bullet. They're not an answer to everything. Because there are what I would call, there's plenty of psychedelic evangelists, or Tim Leary, I guess, is the original psychedelic evangelist with these, turn on, tune in, drop out. It's the idea that if everyone takes a psychedelic, then the world will be a better place. And I don't think that is the case. Psychedelics definitely are not for everyone. Same as alcohol isn't for everyone, sugar isn't for everyone, but maybe it's turned up to a higher degree, I guess, with psychedelics. Um, yeah, and there's the other group of people then that I would term psychedelic exceptionalists. And these are the people that think, well, psychedelics are an exceptional drug. If people with depression take mushrooms once, they'll be cured. And I don't think that's the case either. And psychedelics needs to be tied in with a fairly rigorous program of psychotherapy as well. Um, what are their misconceptions? I guess, well, in the book, I talk about psychedelic realism, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually, which is the idea that psychedelics just cause hallucinations. Um, but yeah, I think psychedelics aren't just random noise. They carry, um, uh, they're coherent. They offer insight, and yeah, they offer transformative sense of meaning. Um, yeah, and just to specify here, because I say it in the book, especially somewhere at the start, I assume. I can't remember exactly, but I'm only concerned with psychedelics under what I would call ideal circumstances. So not just recreational usage, not just going to like Glastonbury and taking mushrooms in a tent with someone. Like I'm not overly concerned with that. And controlled settings, they have great potential for therapy, personal growth, spiritual depth, and they're not just escapism, but it's more like it takes a bit of bravery. It's confrontation with yourself. Often you have to confront buried truths, mortality in some cases, that grapple with the nature of reality. Um, yeah, what other misconceptions? Oh yeah, they're not universally positive. Yeah, this sort of crops up sometimes. They're not a magic bullet. They can be very destabilizing. They can be frightening. They can even be very dangerous if they're not used without, due respect. Preparation, set and setting are two terms that crop up a lot in psychedelics. So the set just refers to your state of mind before, during, and after the experience. Like, are you depressed? Are you worried about something? What's going on in your life at the time? If it's negative, then you should probably not go ahead with whatever psychedelic experience you're thinking of doing. And then the setting refers to the physical environment that you're in. Are you somewhere safe? Are you with people who know what you're doing? Do you have to, are you going to have to take a phone call? Are you going to have to answer the door? All of these sort of situations. So these are like obviously non-ideal. Yeah. What else? What else? I guess the last one is that psychedelics can't be reduced just to brain chemistry. There's more going on than just physical happenstances, I guess. Neuroscience, they can map the correlates, excuse me, like activity in the default mode network changing, for example. But the lived meaning and the structure of experience goes beyond just and neurochemistry. To reduce it to just, I don't know, activity in serotonin receptors misses the existential and the phenomenological dimensions. I guess it's to do with the quality of experience and not just the quantitative happenings of the chemical neural processes that are going on. So there was a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that's completely understandable. I mean, it sort of erases one of my questions, which was key correlations of how different people change after such experiences. I'm going to assume that with regard to what you've just said in the misconceptions, that this is largely subjective. Or have there been found, correlations from certain psychedelic experiences that have uh, not universal, but a collective effect, we could say.
So, but like how people change after the experience, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd say yes and no. It depends on how you're doing it. Like, ideally, I think, like what I would like to see happen for psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is sort of a fairly, that's maybe standardized eventually, but just a set program where there's like maybe 6 to 8 sessions with a psychotherapist before an experience to discuss. People talk about the setting of intentions. Why do you want to take a psychedelic? What do you want to learn? What are you trying to get out of it? So you're not just doing it for recreational purposes, and you spend a long time talking with your therapist about what you're trying to achieve or what you want to happen. And also discussing, what might crop up, how to navigate these experiences if it's someone who hasn't had a psychedelic before. So they're well prepared. I think, whereas in Johns Hopkins, I think they call these, giving people the flight instructions, what's going to happen during the experience. And then during the experience itself, you should be somewhere safe, with they're called a sitter or just somebody in the room, either maybe your therapist ideally and a medical professional like a doctor or a nurse, just on the very rare chance that something bad could happen. But usually with these things, it's a very rigorous screening process. So if you get to that stage, then chances are everything's going to be fine. And then afterwards, you need integration as well. So the day after, maybe a week after, you should sit down and with the same therapist that you were with before and discuss what came up, what happened, what can you learn from it, and how can you integrate those or that experience into your life to maximize the positive benefits. But in those ideal settings, I guess, there are some lasting personality shifts. Studies have shown like increased openness to experience, curiosity, creativity. People report a deepened sense of connectedness to other people, to life, even to nature connectedness is a there's been one or two papers on that by Sam Gandhi. He refers to it as ecodelia, which is their increased sense of nature connectedness after a psychedelic experience. In terms of therapeutic outcomes, there has been shown to be some significant reductions in depression, anxiety, addiction, end-of-life distress as well. Like it's named Roland Griffiths, published a few sort of landmark papers, I guess, in 2006, I think, or 2008, where he's helping people who had received a terminal diagnosis sort of come to terms with the end of their life. There's a strong correlation as well between sort of the positive long-term change and the intensity of the unitive or the mystical aspects of the experience. So it's like the more profound sense of more profound sense of ego dissolution and the greater sense of unity, then that sort of correlates with there being a greater therapeutic benefit. The same with integration. If you actively integrate the experience, either through, with reflection, with therapy, even just like writing about the experience, like the day after, the weeks after, or integrating elements of it into a meditation practice, for example, then you're more likely to sustain positive changes. Because without integration, then insights could fade or just remain sort of, fragmented, I guess, for want of a better term. But again, it changes. Not like some people have amazing breakthrough psychedelic experiences, and then afterwards they just say, "Okay, that was interesting," and just carry on with their lives as usual. So, like, it's not a magic bullet. Like the psychedelics don't guarantee change. They might provide the occasion or the opportunity for transformation, but how that unfolds then really depends on the person's intentions, their life, their support system. So, yes and no, I guess is the short answer.
Well, that's as it will probably be in terms of phenomenology. It's the big question. It's how many people reduce many things, to be honest, that they may not want to deal with the complexities of. There's probably a name for it somewhere in philosophy now. Let's call it like the reductio ad chemistrium or something like that. The reduction to chemistry, as if that somehow explains things. As I want to say on this podcast many times, it's often a rather juvenile thing that teenagers do when they don't want to deal with the pain of love. Love's just chemicals in the brain, as if that somehow simultaneously reduces the experience to something that someone can control. And so we also see this here with what you're naming psychedelic realism, is this common misconception in sort of I guess, one of the cornerstones of your book, that a psychedelic experience isn't just, well, you've ingested this substance, so anything that comes from here on out can really be swept under the rug of it's just chemical changes, and we don't need to really look into the substance of this experience because we know its origin is just this chemical alteration that has been, let's say, like knowingly made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because it's more than just like if you have a headache, you take some paracetamol, and they're the chemicals. It's making physical changes to alleviate the pain.
Mhm.
But if you take psychedelic to say you treatment-resistant depression, there was one case that I was reading about. It like tried all these different like talk therapies, SSRIs, tried everything for like 15 years. Nothing was working. Um, had I think it was one high dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and then immediately, like the next day, there was alleviation of symptoms, which persisted for approximately like 12 months, maybe a year and a half. But like the depression came back. So like I said, it's not a magic bullet, but the chemical effects, like your body processes psychedelics very quickly because it's not a useful state of mind to be in if you're just trying to survive.
Mhm.
But the effects of the psychedelics last, months into the future, or like for that in that case study, like maybe 18 months, but for some people it could last years. So like the effects last longer than just the chemical effects.
Um, mhm, mhm. And I mean, I guess also just from a phenomenological point of view, this is the place to sort of prod at in terms of what, you know, can we bucket both, let's say, forms of phenomenology, which is the phenomenology of non-psychedelic experience? Can we bucket that with psychedelic experience? I mean, from a phenomenological lens, where did you begin the sort of philosophical investigations into how to understand this experience if it can't just be reduced to chemistry?
Ah, yeah, it's a good question. How did I start? It's a good point. It's a good question. Yeah, because I had no sort of end goal when I started. Like I didn't have a conclusion that I wanted to get to. At one point, I had like 15 different chapters that I was like plotting out, and then I realized that like, well, none of these kind of make sense. It's an experience, same as any other experience. So how do we look at that phenomenologically? And one of the key concepts in phenomenology is the idea of intentionality, which just it's a term that comes from the scholastics, and it just means that all mental states have an aboutness or an ofness or directedness, that all mental phenomena are about something. So I took the structure of an intentional act, which is that there's a subject, there's the intentional mode or the mode of givenness. So in the book, I discuss perception and hallucination to a degree. And there's the object, the thing towards which the person is directed. So right now, I'm looking at a coffee cup. So I'm the subject. The mode of presentation, or the mode of givenness, is that of perception, and the object is a coffee cup. But objects can also be, not just physical things. Like if I'm thinking of Sherlock Holmes, then I'm intending an imaginary object, for example. If I'm thinking of uh, the Pythagorean theorem, then I'm intending a mathematical or an ideal object in the Platonic sense. So I use that as the structure of the book to discuss, to say, well, how do psychedelics alter, they can't alter the subject. They don't change your physical being, but um, the way in which the subject engages with reality and the world, and with themselves as well. And then for the mode, I looked at the alterations of perception. And then in the chapter on objects, I look at like the sort of the what's it, levels like 3 and 4 of the psychedelic experience, where you're in the mythopoetic realm. It's like, what sort of objects are you intending there if you're having encounters with Buddha, for example, or whatever the case may be. And then, what's happening then at the full on integral self transcendence, when your ego is totally dissolved. What's going on in that state? Because psychedelics are just another part of what it is to be human. They're not. If nobody had dreams, and then somebody came out in the morning with a little pill and you took that, and then you could have a dream and you fell asleep, I think they'd be treated in the same way that psychedelics are treated now. Um, but I think this should just be sort of psychedelics, just a normal part of human experience. They just happen to be very novel, I guess is probably the correct word to use. Yeah.
So even though, I mean, it might be very much the same answer in terms of, well, it's all part of that same makeup, especially with psychedelics, it seems, from what you've said at the start, but also my own understanding, as you just mentioned, that people might maybe have a conversation with a Buddha, but you also hear of people, having conversations with other entities. I recorded something on Terence McKenna the other day, who had his famous machine elves,
Yeah.
and various other people talking to entities and giving knowledge. So it seems that via this phenomenological state, there is some form of sort of psychedelic gnosis that is fundamentally different to how everyday epistemology. There is some sort of there seemingly is some sort of epistemological leap that's being made. I can't quite articulate it, but yeah, because I guess the question I'm asking is, to the extent that perceptions are changed and senses are changed, is sort of understandable for anyone, even if they haven't had a psychedelic experience, just as the way senses are. But in terms of engagement with other entities or other things of this kind, that seems to change the engagement with phenomena to a fairly wild degree.
It does,
but it also
I also it does, but it does. It's just the novelty is just turned up to could be completely off the charts, and imagination is sort of let loose with like the essential character of things that are cropping up are still. I think that like everything that you learn from a psychedelic experience, you can also learn through meditation, through doing philosophy. I think. Yeah, just through experience with the world. Yeah, the more I think about it, since, because this was what 22 years ago since I've completed this, if you're just doing philosophy and in it, because if you ask philosophers what is philosophy, you're going to get 10,000 different answers, as if you ask 10,000 different philosophers. But doing it in sort of I guess in the Platonic and Neoplatonic sense, and in because you're just grappling with reality and you're trying to understand things. I guess maybe philosophy is more like a brute force way of getting to the same experience. Because you're talking about epistemology there, and in the book I briefly mentioned some epistemological considerations, like Max Scheler, the German phenomenologist. Is like a tripartite division of his epistemology. So the ground level, you have practical knowledge, which is just sort of, that's where you're doing science. That's your empirical approach to reality. You're trying to figure out how things work to alleviate pain and fear. Just to that's why we build houses. That's why we build cars. It's to make our lives easier and happier. On the second level, then he calls it erudition. It's knowledge of essences. That's the domain of knowledge motivated by wonder. So there's Aristotle's claim that the thing that motivates philosophy is a sense of wonder at reality. So on that level, you're looking at transforming your sense of being. You're considering existence, essences, necessity, principle of causality, all of that sort of uh, core metaphysical, philosophical concerns. But then above that, you have the knowledge of revelation or mystical knowledge. So that's knowledge motivated by awe, which I guess comes after wonder. So that you sort of recognition of the sort of the awesomeness of reality. And the purpose of that domain of knowledge is soteriology, and it's to recognize your continuation with the ground of being. So yeah, I think yeah, it's psychedelic experience is it's again always with the asterisks
Mm.
in ideal conditions with correct preparation and integration. It can be very epistemologically rich, or at the very least provide a lot of food for thought about what we think about the nature of reality.
And one other key aspect here seems to sort of be paradoxical, because in the book you say that these experiences can be understood as pilgrimages, and yet one key part of or key factor that often happens in these pilgrimages is the loss of self, is the dissolving of self. And so there's a paradox there that someone willingly undertakes that which they aren't going to experience. So I guess it's a broader question of what is the relationship between psychedelic experiences and the dissolving of the self, which then perhaps doesn't change phenomenology, but sort of alters it, maybe purifies it.
Um, Interesting. Well, what I say about pilgrimage is that the one way to understand psychedelics is through considering what they're like or what they're similar to. And when I started, actually, I think, yeah, there was a Dr. Tatsuma Padoan. He joined the religion department in University College Cork. It was the same year that I was doing my undergrad as well. But he specializes in pilgrimage and spiritual tourism, semiotics. He does a lot of field work with Shingon Buddhists in Japan. So I remember like sitting in his lectures when he was discussing, what was it? Well, yeah, I think it was Turner and Turner and their anthropology of pilgrimage, where there was like three phases. And at the time, I'd started to think about philosophy of psychedelics. And I thought, oh, well, this is very, very similar. So first there's separation. So you decide to go on your pilgrimage, you leave your ordinary role, you take a holiday from your job. And I remember he was saying that for them, you also sort of leave your ordinary identity at home as well to a degree, because you're not concerned with the excuse me, when your ordinary mundane concerns aren't a factor when you're on pilgrimage. So the second stage then is liminality. So there you sort of in between, like their old categories sort of dissolve and then new possibilities open as you sort of dedicate yourself to this pilgrimage. And then the third stage is reaggregation. So that's where you return to your original community, but you're changed by the journey. So I remember seeing that as kind of thing, oh, that's sort of similar to psychedelics. Like they mirror that trajectory. And before all that, I was also a big fan of Joseph Campbell and his idea of the monomyth and the hero's journey, which again, that also has the three parts where there's the separation or the call to adventure, where your ordinary life is disrupted and something happens and new possibilities open up. There's the initiation or the road of trials, which is very like, that's where you're slaying dragons and, rescuing princesses or whatever the case may be. And then there's the return, where you come back to your ordinary life, back to your original community, but you bring back boons, like insights, healing, new perspectives, or whatever. So yeah, I guess for the actual, for Turner and Turner, they're talking about like actual physical pilgrimage. But for psychedelics, it's like a interior pilgrimage. Like mystics often have spoke of like contemplative practices as interior journeys. And I think psychedelics sort of facilitate similar inward pilgrimage into the into the psyche and maybe into the sense of being as well. Um, so they both sort of call for renewal, penance, maybe some sort of encounter. Um, and both idea like the psychedelic experience and pilgrimage can lead to healing, insight, maybe expanded awareness. And sort of it's both sort of like a rite of passage, I guess. Again, always with the with the asterisks of intention and preparation and integration. And I guess you can expand or sorry, continue that on as well into the there's a like the therapeutic approach itself that I'm sort of not advocating, but I think should be in place. I give the preparation, which is that mirrors the departure, setting of intentions. You're preparing your mind and your environment. You have the session, which is like the liminality or the road of trials, which is the experience itself, dissolving ego boundaries and meeting whatever cosmic material presents itself. And then you've the return, the integration, where you're weaving insights back into your daily life. So, yeah, that's psychedelics with the, under ideal circumstances. I guess, recreation is just like just taking a normal holiday, the recreational approach, if you have a safe journey. But if you're doing it for spiritual progress, then it does mirror the path of a pilgrimage.
Yeah. And what of the self that might not come back if it's dissolved?
Well, I think, yeah, because you mentioned paradox around psychedelics are rife with paradox. Um, because I've always, no, I was gonna say, I've always said that's not the case. Like, I think, like, ironically, I think you need a strong ego to after the experience to help integrate what you've learned when your ego wasn't there. Um, so yeah, that's it's a tough question.
Mm. Okay. Okay. I mean, does it have a relationship with common understanding of the mind body dualism?
Uh, yes, I try to avoid.
Okay, we can.
No, you're all right. Yeah, I do mention it, but very briefly when is in the chapter on the self, I talk about different philosophical approaches to understanding what the self is, and I very hastily brush Cartesian dualism aside. Um, yeah, I think I said something like Occam's razor makes short shrift of Cartesian dualism, which is just it's the idea that mind and matter or mind and body are two distinct things and they interact somehow. But I think psychedelics like very dramatically destabilize that separation. They're sort of showing the consciousness as embodied uh, and embedded as well, sort of the other word that's typically used, that it's your body is world involved. You can't separate the physical entity from the environment that it's in. And you also can't separate the mind from the body because to affect one is to affect the other. Psychedelics they can greatly heighten awareness of bodily sensations like your breath, your heartbeat, your tactile presence, kinesthetic awareness in space, and serve to show that the mind isn't somehow floating above the body, but it's sort of enmeshed in bodily rhythms. Um, yeah, and like you feel what was that line from Alan Watts where he feels he didn't feel like a distinct subject separated from the object of the world, but he felt like a hair growing out of a body, that he recognized his metaphysical continuity with the totality of reality. Like ordinarily, like I'm here and the world is there. My coffee cup is there and my computer is there and there's a wardrobe over there. Um, but all of that is just shown to be one great happening. And that your ordinary sense of separation is not the whole story of what's actually happening. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. It does. It does. So what do you feel? your book adds to the study of phenomenology? What is it that you want to sort of throw into the study of phenomenology from this that will progress the investigations in a certain more productive direction, if you see it that way?
Oh, geez, for phenomenology, I hadn't thought of it from that point of view. Well, I guess first I should clarify because phenomenology, the term itself, suffers from the same thing that the term psychedelics suffers from, that there's gross misunderstandings about what it is, or you have to be like very precise. Um, Most of the time when I read the word phenomenology and like any sort of empirical research paper, it's just being used to describe subjective reports about certain experiences, which is just the what its likeness of given experiences, and that's a very minimal approach to what tends to have be called a tame and lame. That's not what I think phenomenology is. I'm talking about phenomenology from the philosophical school of thought that sort of originated with Husserl, but then has branched off. Like these days, there's transcendental phenomenology, there's heterophenomenology, microphenomenology, neurophenomenology, and they're all of different metaphysical allegiances. I think I have a little section of it on the book. I'm talking what my approach is rooted in what's called realist phenomenology. So that's found in the early work of Edmund Husserl, and then carried on by people like Adolf Reinach, Max Scheler, Edith Stein, Dietrich von Hildebrand. Would arguably it traces its roots all the way back to Plato. You could say Plato was a phenomenologist. I'm sure there's probably some philosophers pulling their hair out hearing me say that. Well, Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, maybe Thomas Aquinas as well, because they're all just looking for the essential features of reality and seeing how they map together. So that's sort of phenomenology, as I understand it. Realist phenomenology is what it's termed. Well, how does my book further realist phenomenology? I've never thought of that, to be honest. If it does, I'd be delighted. If it increases, knowledge or appreciation of that specific phenomenological approach, excellent. Because I think in philosophy, when most people hear phenomenology, they're thinking of like Husserl's later work. When, because I think it was around 1905, Husserl made the great mistake of reading Kant and decided to invest or buy into transcendental idealism. So all of his later work is all based on, his metaphysics changed from Platonic to Kantian. So most people associate phenomenology with Husserl's later work. So if I can make more people aware that that's not necessarily the case, like I don't know what an eidetic reduction is. I don't know how that's possible or how it works. So I guess that's, if more people become aware of realist phenomenology, excellent. I'll be very happy.
Yeah, more people to reach Stein.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, what would you like people to take from your book generally?
That's another good question. What would I like them to take from the book? Well, I say, like, explicitly, I don't think the book is, I say that it's hopefully the start of a discussion, that there's many more questions to be asked. So hopefully it provokes more questions and more discussion, because I hasn't put to bed, I haven't answered all the questions about what a psychedelic experience is or what it means or what sort of metaphysical and epistemological weight they carry. So if I can provoke conversation, perfect. I'll be happy with that.
Is there anything you'd like to add about your book that you feel is key that we haven't touched upon?
Let me see. What have we not touched on? I guess, okay, so the core idea that I get to is that of psychedelic realism, which I guess I should unpack carefully so I'm not misunderstood. So psychedelic realism is the idea that psychedelic experiences can reveal mind-independent aspects of reality, which is that they don't just generate illusions. So some underlined the some, highlighted and put some arrows at it. Some features are genuinely reality disclosing, um, even if they're not all aspects of the psychedelic experience are veridical. They can show or can put you in touch with elements of reality which would otherwise not be disclosed, or at least not so forcefully, I guess. So this is, arguing against the view that psychedelics are just hallucinations. But
So,
if you say something, sorry, go on.
well, this I think I was trying to hint towards this earlier, especially with the entities question, because that one seems the most loaded, because it's an agency outside of just pure perception. Is that to what, to what, what is it what pathway is it that one is sort of connecting with the psychedelics, that if psychedelic realism is such as the case, then these entities, to a certain degree, as mind independent, are real agencies with their own wills, they are somewhere, so to speak. I mean, I guess it's just more of a comment with regard to what exactly is it that psychedelics are somehow opening up. It seems that some sort of pathway of communication channel is opened up to some other place of experience that we are usually otherwise barred from. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I don't know, but yeah, barred from is kind of a strong claim. I think, because, as I said earlier, I think there are other routes to. There's more than one way to skin a cat, for want of a better way of putting it. You can have similar, like doing philosophy, meditating. These are different routes to getting the same, or at least I think I could be wrong, to the same experience as a psychedelic experience. Psychedelics are just a lot more. They're like taking the ski lift to the top of the mountain, I guess. Sorry, there was something else you said in there that made me.
Entities.
Oh, the entities. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Agency. That was the word you used. See, I don't think they're different agencies, but just aspects of reality, like archetypical things, not something. I don't think, as Terence McKenna said, the self-transforming machine elves. I don't think you're actually encountering something that wants to tell you something. Like, for example, if you have an encounter with, say, Odin is the one I use in the book, that you see Odin hanging on Yggdrasil, sacrificing himself to gain knowledge of the runes, and you sort of identify with that as sort of like someone yourself, possibly on a quest for knowledge. Like, there, you're not meeting the agency of Odin, but there's the essence of striving, I guess, or desire for knowledge, which is just clothed in the apparition, or the sort of the cultural costume of Odin, in order to communicate that to you. So it's not that this other agency is coming and sitting you down and telling. It's not like me telling my daughter, "Oh, this is what you should do, and these are the things." It's just that you're having this recognition of this feature of reality.
That sounds more like a distinctly Jungian experience.
Possibly. I mean, I need to do a lot more reading on Jung. I know I have a book. Was it Confrontations with the Unconscious by Scott Hill, which is this Jungian approach to the psychedelic experience. But it's on the shelf. I haven't read it yet. It's on the to-do list. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot more work to be done. But like Jung's idea of the archetypes comes from Platonic philosophy. It's, the essence of the eidos. So it's like the essence of knowledge, or the essence of wisdom, or if you're meeting the Buddha, it's the essence of enlightenment or reflection or peace, which is being presented. Just the costume is what's the word I'm looking for? The essence has more reality than the presentation, but that doesn't mean that the experience isn't real. It means part of it isn't real, but the essence behind it, or that which is being communicated, has reality in an ideal sense.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Hmm. And so you're this is and this is you feel this is uh say your own pilgrimage that you're going to continue down this path of research.
Um, yeah, I think so. I have a few different ideas. Well, there's 3 or 4 papers that are in progress at the moment, and the sort of the larger uh, project, which is just sort of, and it's sort of very um, baby stages at the moment, which is very, very different to what I've done before, was sort of a continuation, but sort of at a weird tangent. I'm sort of speaking in parables now, but yeah, there's a few things. There's one working on one thing on epistemology, another one on um, self-dissolution in authorship. So like when people are writing, that there's a sort of a dissolution of self. Yeah, and there's one more sort of elaborating on the dissolution of the self and the ego dissolution in psychedelic experience.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, I'm also trying to be more practical and pragmatic and just looking into, uh, like since doing the book, I recognize, or I'm recognizing all the different areas which need a lot of development. Like there's no like strong philosophical grounding for um, not just psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, but psychotherapy in general. Um, there's a lot of terminology that gets used in psychotherapy, which isn't, hasn't had the philosophical treatment of exactly defining what the term is, like empathy or congruence or authenticity, or self-realization. Like this, because you need to be very precise. And then to carry that over to psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, there's more work to be done, like even with the semiotics of space, like the room in which uh, therapy session takes place. There's like most of the time it's in sort of hospitals, which aren't ideal settings because of there's the harsh lighting. They tried to make them prettier by putting up pictures of landscapes. Usually people have eye shades on and headphones, so it doesn't matter too much. But if someone wants to have like the eye shades off, then they're in a cold, sterile hospital room, which isn't exactly ideal for a psychedelic experience. So yeah, there's lots of, and then there's the metaphysics. What's going on? What approach do you use? Because I sort of danced around metaphysics as much as I could in the book, but there needs to be a much more rigorous argument. Yeah, one way or another. Like I know Peter Shusted uses just like he's interested in using Whitehead's process metaphysics or Spinozism as a way of understanding the psychedelic experience, which I think has a lot of merit, but still needs a lot of fleshing out as well. I think yes was the short answer to the question.
Okay. Okay. Oh, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Um, I was going to say don't do drugs. Uh, um, yeah, like yeah, I hope this provokes conversation. There's a lot of work still to be done. Um, yeah, people should just use psychedelics. Like I probably like years ago before I started, I probably would have been, possibly maybe an advocate. Well, maybe advocate's a strong word. Like I never told anyone that they should definitely do psychedelics. But I think that as I get older, just like people should be more careful with these things. Treat them with respect and do all your due diligence and don't break the law. I think that's it. And just yeah, see for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Buy the book or find it somewhere, read it, um, and see what you think. Just yeah, don't take my word for anything.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to put the link for Phenomenology of Psychedelic Experiences in the description below. And here's to more psychedelic experiences and more research. But Danny, thanks very much. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you very much, James. Thanks for having me.